Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is open up Photoshop. Once we're inside of Photoshop, we can start to do the thumbnail process. So what thumbnails are really, really great at is letting us be able to just throw down ideas really quickly and just get our ideas out there. Even if they're bad ideas, we're just going to get them out of the way so we can start getting the more juicy kind of ideas or more inventive ideas that we can kind of start to draw. So what I like to do is I like to start with a square brush. So I have one selected up here inside of Photoshop. And what I like to do is set my transparency and my spacing. So right here, what I'm adjusting is the spacing on the brush, and we can get this menu by hitting F5. But a lower spacing will let us see less stepping in the brush, so it'll act more kind of like a pen and not so chippy, where we actually see each individual square being painted. So I like to set mine down as low as possible, like 1. Now, if your computer's a little older, a little slower, you might not be able to get this to run, so you can move it up a little bit, but try to get it as low as possible. You'll get a smoother brush result. What I also like to do is come into my transfer menu here, and I like to turn up my flow jitter just a little bit and my basically minimum pressure under my pen. So what this minimum slider does underneath of pen pressure is allows me not to have to push so hard with my Wacom pen when I'm drawing a line. So when we move it up about 17%, I can never get it down to a 0 basically drawing. So if I were to push really light, I'd get a very, very light drawing. Now it's always going to draw at least 17% of its total color capacity. So that's what I like to set that to, at least to get a little bit easier on my hand, so I don't have to push so hard. Now that I have my brush kind of set up, I'm just going to start kind of doodling some shapes. So it's not really important how hard you push. I like to just kind of modulate the pressure just to kind of get a little bit of shadow and shape in there, just so I have some informed shape. So it kind of looks like some pieces are in front or behind others. Now I'm just going to kind of play with the shape of the legs, see if I can come up with something a little bit more kind of inventive. So maybe like a little kind of chicken mech rig thing here. Not the most original concept, but in the same time, we're really just trying to get our ideas out. So if you have anything and it just kind of feels good, just like start doodling. This is the time to do it. Where we really can have a lot of our creative freedom. We're not really trying to make any particular shapes. I'm just kind of exploring different little details, like maybe the hands kind of cut back and there's a little extra thing on them. So once we do one, we're going to do a couple on a sheet. So maybe I'll try to do something a little bit different of a shape. Maybe I'll do another tall mech. I'm going to change my brush just to make it a little bit bigger, just to try to keep myself from making too many little details too early. I always find this to be a little bit helpful. So just going to kind of draw on a little body shape here and see where it takes me. Maybe some little leg joints. Again, those are like little kind of kickbacks. And I'll modulate the pressure just a little bit, just push down a little bit lighter just to kind of help get a little bit of that nice kind of fade. Now, it's not super important in the thumbnail step to do that. And actually, at times, it's better just to turn your transparency completely off so it's 100% pressure on. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to kind of invent new shapes and not have to worry so much about the shading behind. What I'm doing here is I actually took the smudge tool or actually this is me with the paintbrush. I'm actually just painting away the background. So I don't have these on a layer, so I can just kind of paint in white instead of using the eraser tool. And I can switch really fast between my two different color palettes by just hitting X. That'll switch you between your foreground and background color in your paint palette. So I'm gonna draw on a little arm, maybe a little weird hand, just something fun. Just a little different body. He's a little bit more chunky. They're not kind of like a little kind of spine exposed. See if I can't play around with like a little top rail detail. See what we can come up with the feet. Maybe I'm gonna try to do a little ski type thing. Maybe a little bit longer, just something weird. I eventually didn't really like this, but I was just experimenting. And that's something we have to keep really key, is to think like, don't limit yourself in any of your designs, your ideas. Like really just kind of push yourself. Let yourself do some fun new ideas and try different shapes. So start with a little boxy. I think I tried to do a more like a quadruped, something like 4 or 6 legs, just to try to mix it up. It's a little bit different. And you can see actually the square brush helps quite a bit sometimes, especially with like mechanical design. Because what happens is it allows me to keep those nice, clean, sharp edges, even if they're a little jaggy right now. Some of those can become happy accidents where I can kind of see little details that kind of just pop out. So maybe these are like little rocket packs on its back. Or maybe they're like big eyes or anything, you know. We really haven't defined anything yet. It's just kind of seeing like what looks good together and proportionally. So I'm constantly just kind of checking and looking to make sure like it feels right, like the weight, like it's not, those rockets aren't too big or whatever it is. And then also I kind of put the X in the middle there to see if I can kind of like fill in some of the space, but leave little holes for light to come through. So we can kind of get these like little negative space areas and feel kind of nice. So I'm going to set up and do a couple more here. Just again, I'm going to play with the shapes and see what we can come up with. So just start blotting some stuff in. Make more like a T shape. Maybe a little bit wider of a mech. A lot of these guys are pretty tall. Just see what we can come up with shapes wise. And I'm really just doodling. I'm really just kind of like putting lines down, just seeing how it feels. Just checking. See if I like what's happening with the shape. Usually, and it might sound kind of vague to say that, but at the same time, like, you'll start to learn as you paint more and more, which just kind of feels spatially right. So I'm looking at the proportion, like, does the top of this feel like it's gonna like snap off when it meets the body? Kind of like that head unit. So maybe you wanna like thicken it up a little bit so it doesn't look too weak. Think about it like as a real machine. Like, does someone has to ride inside this? Or is it like strictly a robot? Try to do like a little bit of a curve, something a little different, just to add a little variety from some of these straight mechs. Maybe it's another four-legged or a little like spider mech, or maybe the like legs come back in a really weird way. Maybe it's like super narrow. It's like, try to think about purpose too. Like, some of these mechs might be better at like artillery or like being like stealthy or sneaking around. So what I did here is I really didn't like the position that the robot was in. It was getting too low on the page, so I started compromising the leg. So I just used the Marquee Lasso tool. So just use the Lasso tool. You can hit L on the keyboard, make a selection around it, and just kind of move it up. You can also avoid this if you just had used its own layer, but I like to be able to just paint or just pull away, just keep it all in one, keep it more organic. So by pulling that back, it allows me a little bit of freedom to kind of draw it the way I really want it to, instead of trying to cram it on the page. So never be afraid to move things around or resize them while you're painting. It can really help to kind of just open your canvas up and get a little bit more perspective on some of the different design elements you could kind of push. Here again, I'm just kind of playing with an idea, some maybe a little like ski feet or something. We'll do one more, just to give us 6 on a page. We don't want to do too many thumbnails on a single page. It becomes like kind of distracting and hard to tell what's going on, or to be able to pick which are the best designs out of the ones we've made. So I like to keep it around like 6 thumbnails, just really quick. We haven't refined our thumbnails or anything at this point. We're just trying to get ideas down. We're just kind of literally noodling. You know, this is the best time for an artist, is just in here, just to kind of play with shapes and ideas that, you know, maybe one of these mechs has a giant gun on its back, or it's used for like carrying people out of a like war zone, or maybe it carries puppies, who knows? Like a vet robot. You know, there'd be special design considerations and things you might want to add. So on this one, I was trying to think of this, like maybe we'd do these like weird, crazy ape hanger arms that were designed, you know, maybe his arms had to like really bend out far, but he kind of had them in this weird kind of configuration temporarily. So I'm just going to recenter him on the page just to kind of get him a little bit off that edge. And I just use the selection tool to move those. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to grab 3 that I liked the most, and I'm going to kind of refine them a little bit. So out of the designs, I kind of like this middle one, and this top left one too and stuff. So I'll just come here with the lasso tool, just kind of select it, and I'll just drag it into a new document. Just kind of place it where I want to. And I'll pick another one. Yeah. It's kind of like in the way this guy was just kind of feeling like a little missile pod robot. Sure I have the right tool selected. Come in here, select them. That feels good. So I'll just position them next to the other one. And I'll kind of get these together just so I can kind of review them together. And I wasn't quite sure what the last one I was going to pick. Kind of like the last ape hanger arm. This guy had interesting like kind of eyes kind of coming out. I could imagine like being some really cool cameras or the displays out there. Maybe they're like lights, like it's a police officer mech or something. And so now we have our thumbnails kind of refined. And what we'll do in the next video is we'll come in and we'll start doing a detail pass and trying to see if there's any more interesting shapes we can kind of pull out of these Mechs designs.